When it comes to storyboarding for animation, Storyboard Pro is my top choice, and it's also the most commonly used for storyboarding in the animation industry, mostly for TV. However, another thing that's not really talked about is storyboarding in Photoshop, and that's what I've used mostly during my time in feature animation and the recent Blue Eye Samurai, which is, of course, boarded in Photoshop. And in the comments regarding my Blue Eye Samurai work, a lot of people were curious about how I board in Photoshop, what's my process like, and what does it look like to use some of the functions in Photoshop for storyboarding. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how I storyboard using Photoshop, as well as preparing them as context sheets or a PDF through Adobe Bridge. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to talk about what's better, boarding in Photoshop or boarding in Storyboard Pro. Hey guys, it's Toniko Pantoja, and today I want to show you guys how I storyboard using Photoshop. Now, this isn't just how I storyboard, but it's about how a lot of other people in feature animation, how other story artists storyboard in Photoshop. So I've worked for DreamWorks Animation, Netflix, and Strange Weather Films, so this is quite common in, the feature animation world, especially in storyboarding. So I want to show you an example that I have from the Croods too. So if I were to flip between my panels, you can see that the drawings change, the panels change, and you might be asking yourself, how is this possible? How are you doing that? And the answer is layer comps. So as you can see, my layer comps and my layers, you can see things are happening as I flip between them. You can see some, as I flip between the layer comps up here, you'll notice that things are toggling on and off during invisibility and visibility. So I want to talk about how to set that up and how I use this for boarding. So I'm going to give a really basic demo of layer comps or how it works. So, I'm just going to make a little drawing of a guy right now. So I'm just going to, quickly doodle a dude right now. And, that's our dude. So here's our dude, and that's our first layer. And now I'm going to, put him in perspective, So let's just give him a vanishing point somewhere. And let's add, some trees. Let's just add like a really rough background here and there. And let's turn down the opacity. All right, so now we have a basic storyboard of one guy and one background. All right. So now I want to make this into a storyboard panel using layer comps. So in order to do that, I make sure my layer comps window is open right here. If you can't see that, you might have to hit window and then layer comps and click that just to open that. So I'm going to hit this plus sign over here. And when I hit that plus sign, it's going to ask this prompt up here. You can name the layer comp, you can name the panel. I'm just going to leave it whatever. I'm only going to turn on visibility. I'm not going to do all these other things because I've had glitches and weird things happen when I tried to work with this. Visibility to me makes the most sense. It's simple. So I'm going to hit OK. So now it's going to register that as a single panel, one layer comp. And now I want to make another layer comp, which is now panel 2. Okay, so now I want to make this this guy emotionally react. So I'm going to use this first drawing as a reference, and I'm going to turn down the opacity. Right? And then now I'm going to hit a new plus on my layers to make a new layer. And then I'm going to make my guy, I don't know, ecstatic. Let's give that a shot. Okay. And then I'm going to hide my previous layer. So if I flip back and forth, you're going to notice that it didn't really do anything. And the reason for that is I have to manually update it on the layer comp. So also notice is that it doesn't really register opacity changes. It only registers layer visibility. So I'm going to turn this all the way back to 100%. I'm going to go to my next layer comp. I'm going to hide this now and activate my previous layer. So I hit the previous drawing. And notice how this checkbox here is empty. What you're going to want to do is you're going to hit this button called refresh layer comp or update layer comp. And when you hit that, watch this. Now when I hit this, watch this little gray box here. It's going to change. And this icon here means that it's updated. So if I flip back and forth, now we have 2 panels of storyboarding. So here's an example of a storyboard PSD file with a bunch of different layer comps with lots and lots of layers. And you know, the more layers there are, the more assets there are in a PSD, the bigger the file goes. So this is essentially how I board in Photoshop. Now, as you can see, these things aren't cleaned up. It's just there as layer comps. This is for an abandoned project that I did years ago. So let's go back to that and look at my layers, right? So we have, you know, layers for the line art of the ocean and the water, and if I hit the next one, it's going to show a different set. So basically how I usually work is that each folder pretty much represents a single shot, usually, in most cases, in the way that I board. So yeah, like I sometimes have a lot of different effects going on, but essentially I don't do this like pass this thing with like effects and things like that until the very end. So here's an example using some Blue Eye Samurai boards that I did as an example of how I board in layer comps or in Photoshop. And as you can see, it's all set to layer comp, right? And if you can see my layers, it's showing what's visible and what's not. Now I just did it in one giant folder for a single shot. That's how I usually do it. For background movements, I make a new layer for each movement, as you can see. Now, you could, if you wanted to, like let's say if you made a new layer comp, you can set it based on position of the layers and things like that, but I don't usually do it because sometimes it doesn't update or save it properly when I export it over. So I usually turn that off, and I just usually resort to duplicating the asset or the image and then just moving it as I please. So I don't just use layer comps for things like storyboarding, but also for doodles, sketches, illustration, etc. So as you can see here, I have a sketch of a character, but I've also done my cleanup, my automatting, and you can see that as I flip through my different layer comps. See? So I've already done these in a different pass, and the way layer comps works is that it basically shows a preset of what's visible and what's not, and you can customize this. So in one layer comp, I have the rough sketches invisible, my cleanup visible, and in another one, now I have different ones set up. And as you can see on my layer comps and my layers window, you can see as I flip through them, and I assigned a hotkey to the actions of flipping through them, is that you can see that it's toggling between what's visible and what's not. There's multiple ways you can set your keyboard shortcuts to the layer comp functionality. So as I have it, I actually have it set to my actions, but if you really want it to be more pure or more organized, you can go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and it'll pop up a new menu. Make sure for Shortcuts 4, switch this to panel menus and look for layer comps, and you can find all the available options here. Now, I guess the reason why I did actions first was that it was actually given to me earlier as an actions. I modified it, and it's easier for me to transfer the actions from one machine to another if I needed to do that. So I'm going to show you guys how I use my function keys and my actions. So as you can see, I've set all my shortcuts to these actions here, and I'm going to show you guys how I use that. So F5, I set my F5 key to make new layer comps. So if I hit F5, now it's going to make new layer comps. If I hit F3 and F4, now I can toggle between back and forth. But F6, I made a button or action specifically to refresh and update the layer comps. So if, let's say, I made a new layer and I added a smiley face and it's not updated, I made a key for that to update it. So when I flip between them, you can actually see it. Now, this is just another way of setting your keyboard shortcuts. In order to do that, if you wanted to do it how I did it, you can go to your actions window. Sorry, so let's go to window, actions. I have it set on button mode, but I'm going to switch it back to default mode because this is where you can actually make your actions. So if I go to my my F5, F3, F4, you can see that it's already applied some of these actions. Okay, so I'm going to make a new one, and I'm going to show you guys just an example. Let's say I want to make another. Let's say I want to make one that makes two layer comps at once, or new ones. So I hit plus, and I'm going to call this new. Okay, and let's say I set it to F7, and what I want this to do is I want it to make two new layer comps. So now that it's So let's say I want to make a new action, and let's say I wanted to make two layer comps. This is just an example. I'm gonna set it to F8, and I'm going to hit record. Okay, well, you know what, let's set it to F12. Oh no, I have all these like different shortcuts set for these buttons already. Okay, so I found F10, that's available. Okay, so now that now it's recording, it's going to record anything that I do in Photoshop. So I'm just gonna hit, you know, make two new layer comps at once, all right? And I'm gonna hit stop. And so when I hit F10, it's going to make me two new layer comps at once. So yeah, that's basically how I set my key bindings using actions. But again, there's also the option of going to your keyboard shortcuts and again finding the panel menu and finding the layer comps and do that for yourself here. It might be faster this way. It might make Photoshop work more optimized this way, but you know, to each of their own. When I board in Photoshop, I have a separate PSD where I plan all my layout, all my master files. So if, let's say, I had a big giant background for pans, I usually just do it here. And this is where I also put my thumbnails. So as you can see, I'm flipping through my layer comps because I have multiple pages of ideas and planning for this idea that I have, right? So usually when I thumbnail my boards, right, I have, let's say I wanna choose a shot to storyboard to. I'm going to duplicate the file. So if you go down to your history, so, you know, make sure you have the history window open through window and in history. And if you hit this, right, this button over here that I'm highlighting, it's going to make a new file. It's going to make a duplicate of that file. But again, it also duplicates all the hidden layers. So I'm going to select layer and hit flatten image. Now everything is flattened. And I can just, you know, highlight everything. Now I can just like move stuff. So from here, if I wanted to bring these thumbnails into a PSD, I'm going to hit new. I'm going to set my preset to, I guess, what, 1920 by 1080 as an example for now. And then I go back to my flattened image with the thumbnails. I'm going to select the panel that I want to thumbnail. I'm gonna copy that and then paste it, and then I'm going to make it fit, and then I'm going to save that as a layer comp. I'm going to make a new layer comp for now, go back to the file, and I'm going to select a different panel that I want to storyboard, and then I paste that and I shrink it and make it fit. I hide my previous drawing and update it. So now I have two panels for my actual storyboard. So I'll do a pass of just putting all my layer comps in order of just thumbnails. And once I feel ready to clean it up, then I make a folder for each shot. Now, usually I want to keep updating it, but sometimes it does that automatically. I mean, the folders are just there to save the files or put them in. But now it's just easier for me to organize if I just want to drag things around. Dragging the folders around will not change how flipping will happen or the order of the panels. You can only change the order of the panels through here. So you can be as messy as you want in your Photoshop. I just try to keep things organized, right? So let's turn this into an actual storyboard that looks ready for production. So I'm going to turn the opacity of my thumbnail down like this, and I'm going to clean up the drawing. Sometimes I like to keep things organized where I have like the BG of you know, group 1. You can rename this. You can keep the naming disorganized. It's really up to you. But let's say I just do a really quick background. You know, don't critique the drawing here. It's really just for an example of you know, boarding in Photoshop. So let's say I make a crappy little background for now. This is a placeholder, and I'm going to turn down the opacity of that. I'm going to make a new layer for my character. So I'm just going to make a more tied down, or no, not sorry, a cleaner shorthand of this drawing. just so that it's readable and clear and something that's like fast for me to draw, because with storyboarding you kind of have to be really, really fast and really loose. Beautiful drawings don't matter. Detailed, beautiful drawings don't matter. It's really just about the clarity. And of course, I can just like keep erasing things. I can just clean things up, especially when you're someone who draws really, really rough. Just use the eraser to clean some edges out, right? Right. And then let's say I have something like this. I usually make a separate layer for different characters. And I'm just going to quickly draw a character here. And then I'm going to, let's say, hide my thumbnails, and I'm going to update it. So when I flip now it's got a much cleaner-ish version of these two characters. So again, let's say I want to make a new pose of this guy. I'm going to turn down the layer here so I can kind of see it. But, you know, as someone like me who likes to animate, and when I animate, I flip a lot, I usually just turn this on to the max and just flip between the frames. But let's say, you know, most story artists that I know do it this way, where they can see the previous drawing and then just add on top of it. So let's say I do a different, just subtle pose. All right, so I've done my new acting pose. I'll turn this back to max, my previous drawing, and hide it for this layer comp. And then I hit update. So when I flip between them, now I have a different acting pose for this character. So I'm going to do the next character next, and I'm going to show you that, like, as someone who animates, I usually like to just turn when I'm working on the next panel, I turn off my previous drawing, and I just flip between them, as you can see here. That's just the way I like to work, because oops. Okay, so now I have 3 different panels. And then you know what? Let's say I want to add tone, and this is where a lot of feature board artists, the reason why they have tones is this next step, where I just add, let's say, a new, I'll just lasso it, right? So let's say I just do a lasso below one of my characters for now. And then I'm just going to give it a light gray tone. There we go. So I'm gonna hit that, and now I update it, and now for that panel, you know, I kind of have to apply it to the next panels to have that, just because it does. I have to update it. You know, sometimes like I could use the same art, but you know, in most cases I like to, you know, make a new one, and then just do the same thing. And then now, if I flip between them, now I have something that's toned down. And of course, I can go back to it. I can set my opacity down and just add a bit of, like, let's say, tones here and there, right? Just like some values, just to make it feel a lot more complete, or give it a bit of tone and mood. I can do it in a separate layer. I can do it in the next layer. It's really just up to you. Like for this one, I just do it on, I think I just did, yeah, I did it on my line art, depending on how you want to work. That's how I usually do it. But, you know, the beautiful thing about Photoshop Actions is that if I, let's say, selected this guy that I have, and, you know, years ago, I made an action for myself, and you can also buy it online on my store, is that I made an action that allows me to sort of, and I'm going to switch back to button mode and action. So if you want to switch back and forth to, you know, button mode and list mode, you toggle this little line here and hit button mode. So yeah, I've already made actions of presets. So I'm going to do a preset where I Automatte it. So now he's got a shape already. I can darken the matte. Now there's darkness in there. I can lighten it. So again, this made it easier for me, and I actually made presets of all these lighting effects, so I can hit these to add lighting here and there. I can add something shadowy or softer. So the reason why I can board fast in Photoshop and apply tones like this is because I made actions that allowed me to do that quickly. So yeah, there we go. That's how I usually board in Photoshop. So let's say I want to export this now. I hit File, I hit Export, and I hit Layer Comps to Files. And this window pops up. It popped up on my other monitor. This pops up, and now you can save this to whatever folder you want and hit Run. And I made sure it's a JPEG. You can save it as a PSD if you want, but if you save it as a PSD, it's also going to bring in the hidden layers, and each PSD panel is going to be the same file size as the master PSDs. So, you know, if you can, just hit JPEG, and I'm going to hit Run. And it's going to now save these as independent JPEG files in that. So now if I go to my folder, it now has my panels as separate JPEG. So I can preview them, I can flip them, but you know what? We're not done here yet. Now we're going to move on to Adobe Bridge, and this is where I create flippable PDFs, I make contact sheets if I want to prepare a portfolio to send to studios, and basic board organization. Now I want to bring up that in a lot of the feature productions I've been on in the industry here, we've mostly used Flix, which is a web-based application where we put our boards together. Unfortunately, we do not have that. It's not one of those tools that you can just get and download and use. You need a whole department to install this in servers. But before Flix was installed in our systems, Adobe Bridge was commonly used and is a good alternative. So here is a giant file that I have of all these story beats that I drew for a short film idea that I abandoned just because different changes in goals. So yeah, here's all these story beats that I did in a single PSD file. So it's a gigantic file, and now I want to make a contact sheet out of them. So I go to File, I'm gonna export it like I did it for my storyboard example, and I'm just going to make sure that I save it in the appropriate folder. So let's call these beats for now. And then I'm going to, this was called Project Rice Ball at one point, and I'm gonna hit Run. Now it's just gonna save all of these as a JPEG. And I can flip through them to see if it works well, if it looks good. So now I'm ready to put this in a portfolio, or I want to be able to organize this better. Or I want to have it in a better naming convention than this. And this is where we switch on to Adobe Bridge. So Adobe Bridge is what a lot of story artists use, and I'll show you why. So let's say I want to, I think like the order of these files don't make sense. I can actually like move them around and stuff like this. And now when I go through them, it's placed in the order that I set it. So if I leave that folder and then come back to it, it's going to save that, as you can see. So when I storyboard in Photoshop and using Bridge, when I save my PSDs or my JPEGs, I can reorganize my boards here and there just to see if things work in a better order. So I'm going to go back to the beats that I did, right? So here are all these beats that I rendered that I showed previously. And let's say I want certain things to be switched around. So I think this should be deleted, so I can delete that. You can reject it. I don't know. I can't remember what that does. But, let's say I decide I want, let's say I want this shot to be before this one. And now I have that set. But again, it keeps all the name and the order of the name intact. So I want to now change the naming convention. So I'm going to select all my drawings. Oh, by the way, I'm using Essentials as my workspace for this one. So I'm going to select all of it. And now I'm going to right click and hit Batch Rename. And it's going to give you a few options of how you want to do this. I'm going to delete this one, right? I'm going to set my name, Toniko Beats, sequence number, I usually start at 00 and I'll rename them. And now as you can see, it renames them based on how you wanted the preset or how you wanted it to rename it. And of course, if you go back to the batch rename, you can add how you want to do that. So it does that automatically. Okay. All right. So next, let's convert this into a PDF where I can upload it online and make it my storyboard portfolio. So I'm going to select all of these. Oh, before I select all of these, I want to make sure my workspace is now set to output. So now it's going to open a new window, a new layout. So I'm going to select all of these, right? And I'm going to drag all my images to this thing above it. So I'm going to select it all, and I'm going to drag it. So now it's going to organize it in a certain way, or the order of the files that you have in the files. So as you can see, I'm flipping through it and it looks good. If you guys want to, you can change the template of things. You can change it to a few contact sheets, something like this. There's presets for that, or you can do one image per panel. And for storyboard sequences, if you put the PDF of your storyboard sequence to an online portfolio, you can just upload it to like PDF viewer or portfolio slider. I can't remember some of those names, but recruiters and people looking at your portfolio can just flip it through like this. And I'm previewing it here. So on the right, this is where you can actually figure out the resolution, the export, any things like that. If you guys don't like the presets here, you can actually change it here, right? If you want to. But let's say I want to export everything like this, where each image is in a single page. I'm going to hit export to PDF, and I'm going to save my PDF as something, So I'm just going to call it blah, 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 and save it. So it's going to save it. Usually it opens a new window to show the PDF, but let me see if it does that. Oh yeah, it does. So it just opened a new window for me. So now I can preview flipping through it. And that's pretty much how PDFs are made using Adobe Bridge. But again, let's say you wanted to make a portfolio piece. So instead of like a portfolio page where there's multiple art on each page. So I'm going to do the same thing where I select everything, put it all. Maybe let's say I'll have maybe 2x2. Let's do 3x2. I think, yeah, 3x2. Let's have something like this. And I'm going to export the PDF as blah 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 2, and it's going to export it. So it's exporting right now, and let's see how that looks. And now we have a rough version of something that, if you wanted to, you can add more information on Photoshop. You can take these images, put it in Photoshop, and printify it or organize it better, but at least you have a rough base. It's kind of like if you wanted to submit storyboards. This could be your storyboard layout. In most cases, if you're doing like a hard copy storyboard, right? So it's just a storyboard for your storyboard portfolio that's tangible. It's not digital. Usually, from what I remember, it's ideally you want 4x4 per page, and I'm just gonna export that blah blah 3, right, whatever, and it's exporting. So if it previews it, so imagine these are storyboards. Now this is like a storyboard page. You can go back in Photoshop and add like dialogue if you needed to, or captions. But this is a quicker way to get, like, instead of like having to put your panels one by one, which I did for my earlier portfolios, you can do it quickly using Adobe Bridge. It just lays it out. The bulk of the labor work is done, and now it's just more about finessing, adding some missing dialogue here and there. etc., so on and so forth. So yeah, that's pretty much how you can make a storyboard portfolio using Adobe Bridge. Now, some of you guys might be asking, is it better to board in Photoshop or Storyboard Pro? And if you know how I work and what my goals are, I would say Storyboard Pro because it is a program made for an animation production. But if I join a feature production that uses flicks in Photoshop, then I would just use Photoshop. Now, the reason why I used Photoshop for a show like Blue Eye Samurai was because the editors preferred it, my directors preferred it. I personally made Photoshop actions that automated the lighting process. They prefer specific PSDs, but I think if you're just submitting image files or image sequences, then I think whatever program you decide to use doesn't really matter. Unless it's for really specific reasons. That's just my opinion. Some people like Photoshop because of the actions or because of things like the illustrative process if you want to make your boards more illustrative. I really think it's just a matter of preference. Now, one thing that I will say that a lot of people cannot deny is that the usage of Storyboard Pro enabled a lot of storyboard artists to over-animate their boards because you can edit videos in it, you can time things there, you can sync sound to it. So when you see a lot of TV boards, they're super animated. Now with Photoshop, a lot of artists prefer to be more decisive or be more economic just because Photoshop isn't really built for that. So as you see a lot of feature boards, they're very economic. But you know, before Storyboard Pro and before Photoshop, I was storyboarding in Adobe Animate, or back then, Adobe Flash. All my student films were boarded in Flash first. Look, as long as you can make slides, you can make image sequences, and you can just export that and maybe edit it later in some image video editing software, then you're good to go if you want to put that into an animatic. Anyways, that's all, bye. Interested in learning hand-drawn animation or learning how to finish an animated shot from beginning to end? Have a look at the store where you'll find the complete Introduction to 2D Animation video course, tutorials, and other resources. Learn classical animation approaches, drawing, lectures, techniques, and other process videos. Visit the store through the link in the description below.